Hi, welcome to Corruption Chronicles. Today we're going to be speaking with Grant. Grant, how do you say your last name? Is it Raphael?
Raphael, yes, ma'am.
Raphael, okay. Today we're going to be speaking with Grant Raphael, and I met Grant actually when we were both pitching to be on some TV shows and podcasts and all kinds of exciting things. And he had some really interesting stories about corruption, and you won't be surprised when I tell you it's Louisiana. Is that right, Grant?
Yes,
Yeah.
ma'am.
And is it New Orleans? Actually, New Orleans, or?
Well, I live about an hour away from New Orleans, but
Okay.
close. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so maybe not so bad as New Orleans. Well, you can tell us in a minute. So I wanted to talk with Grant because he'd said he wanted to run for public office, and I was very eager to have him do that, but also to hear why he wanted to do that, and particularly glad because he's young and we need to get younger people in office. So today we're going to be talking with Grant, and he has a really good personal story too, and I think along the way discovered some corruption. So the purpose of Corruption Chronicles is to talk about corruption that people have found, and then what everyday people did to take it down and to fix it. So Grant has some thoughts of his own, and I think it'll be fun to hear from him. So Grant, go ahead and if you want to introduce yourself and take it away, that would be great.
Awesome. Well, I think it's just really funny how I got to where I am now, because like you said, I'm running for a public office. I'm passionate about corruption, but it didn't always start out that way. And really what I was focusing on ever since I was about 5 years old was I wanted to become a doctor. I just wanted to help people, and I thought, what better way to help people than to become a doctor? And my entire life, that's what it was: doctor, 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 doctor. Until 2012, I was at LSU. I was getting my biology degree to try and go to medical school when I got sick with West Nile Encephalitis. And that's the disease I got from a mosquito. Disease I got from a mosquito.
Keep going, Grant. I have to answer this call. So you keep going, and I'm going to have to take this one. Hi, this is Debbie.
Not a problem. Right. And so it's a disease I got from a mosquito, and it inflamed my whole nervous system. So I was having seizures. I was in and out of the hospital, chronic migraines. And my doctor said, Grant, there's no cure for this disease. We can only give you medication for the symptoms. And I got addicted to the medication. If I went one day without taking it, I was bedridden. I could barely get out of bed. And I was miserable. And after about 2.5 years of trying all these different procedures,
Can I ask you, what was the medication?
The only one I remember off the top of my head was amitriptyline. I don't remember the other ones, but they basically just kind of helped out with your nerves. I know one kind of helped with mood and sleeping, because most of my seizures were at night and it was miserable. But like I said, my body, if I went just one day with missing it, forgot it at home, or I was just sick. And like I was saying, I had 50 shots in the back of my head one time. Saw all these different doctors, saw all these different tests, and after 2.5 years, my doctor said, "You know what, Grant? We've tried everything. Nothing's helping. You're gonna have this for the rest of your life." And that was the moment when I was like, okay, in nice words, I was like, well, screw that. I refuse to believe that I would just get sick, and then my life would just go downhill for the rest of my life. So that's when I really started doing my own research. I started looking into the best diets. I started exercising daily, started meditating and praying, and I started getting even closer to God. And this was in 2015. I remember I was praying to God one time. I said, God, life's not about me. It's about everyone. It's about you, God. I said, I don't want my will. I don't trust myself. I said, I just want your will. I said, I don't care if I die alone, poor, depressed, or never get better. I said, I just want to help make the world a better place. And I'd be willing to sacrifice my life if it means helping others. And I had said that, but then asked myself, okay, well, did I really mean it? And as I was praying, I was asking myself, would I be truly willing to sacrifice my life for others? And as I was praying, it's like something within me said, yes, I would. And then a snap, I felt the Holy Spirit all up around me, and I was completely healed on the spot. And hand on my heart, people notice to be true, ever since 2015, I've had no seizures, no migraines, no problems whatsoever. I've been completely off all medication. And my doctors at the time, they're like, Grant, we don't know what happened to you, but you don't need to see us anymore. And I've literally have not gone to the back doctor since. So then it became a dilemma for me. So what is it that I want to do with my life? Again, I wanted to become a doctor my whole life, but now with this, maybe there's something else I was called to do. And ultimately, I had a dream one night, and in the dream, I was going back to school, taking classes, and I saw along the walls health policy advisor. And I woke up and I started looking into, so what is a health policy advisor? What is it that they do? And I saw that they work for governments, local, state, federal governments, and they actually help implement health policies. And I realized, okay, well, this is my actual calling, because if I spent all those years going to medical school, I could still help people. I could help diagnose and give them medicine, but I felt like I would run into the same problems that my doctors ran in with me, to where I would say, well, we have no cure for this. There's no medicine for this. Here's the best we can do. But I realized, okay, by becoming a health policy advisor, by getting into working with governments, I can actually start implementing new policies that would actually help people and improve lives. And so that was the start of my wanting to get into politics. But during all my research is when I really started looking into all the corruption that comes along within it. I didn't know if you had any questions. I know I saw you were on the phone.
When you said you were doing your research and it started all the corruption that came along with it, was that just general or was it specific to where you live?
It started off general. And so one of the things that I wanted to talk to you about is just, I said it in the email, but when I say the term conspiracy theorist, what is it you think of?
Well, sort of a crazy person or someone who thinks that there's something, who thinks that everything is corrupt, or who makes up kind of wild and wacky, comes up with some pretty wild and wacky ideas that don't necessarily fit with the facts, or they have alternative facts. And I'm glad you asked that, because that's one of the things that concerns me about this particular podcast, is that I'm not bringing on people who are conspiracy theorists. I didn't start out as I didn't start out, and I am still not a conspiracy theorist. I really believe in looking at what's there and fact checking, and then if the facts tell you that that's what's going on, well, then that's a whole different thing. And so that's really where I'm coming from. Maybe you could respond to that.
Yes, definitely. And that's the whole thing. That's the problem when it comes to tackling corruption, is how do you acknowledge corruption, but then you don't fall into the trap of a conspiracy, or what the conspiracy theorists fall into. And I'll tell you what people do, what people try to dilute when it comes to exposing corruption is it's the same thing that the devil does, right? They give you the truth and then they add a little bit of lie on top, and that little bit of lie on top just completely just washes everything away. So just for example, and I'm making this up, I don't know the person, but let's say the governor of Alaska, right? I don't even know if it's a man or a woman. Let's say the governor of Alaska is actually a corrupt politician. They're accepting bribes, they're doing sketchy things on the side, they're doing all these things that they shouldn't be doing. And the rumors gets out, people start kind of figuring it out. But then people start talking about the politician. They say, "Oh yeah, well they're a reptilian. They're some alien person, and they're fake. They're a robot. They replace this person." But and they start saying all these different things. Well, now all of a sudden you're saying all this stuff trying to expose this politician, and people are like, "You're just crazy. Like what? Like you're calling them all these different things, and it completely just diminishes what you're trying to do. It turns into the boy who cries wolf." And so it's kind of like you said, it's about when it comes to corruption, like, okay, so what are the actual facts? What are the actual things that's going on? And just for me personally, it was really funny how it was like a snowball effect when it came to corruption. And the first thing that really stood out to me, I got lost in the internet just looking up all this stuff. But I read about how in World War II, after the Americans freed, the Holocaust, the concentration camps, they basically executed all the German generals, like all the German officials that were in charge of the camps, executed them.
By
but
the Americans.
Mhm.
Oh, I
But
didn't know that. Wow.
yeah, the Americans and the Russians, both of them, like basically they tried them all for war crimes, and like just about all the officials got convicted. But the scientists for the Nazis, the ones that were actually experimenting and doing inhumane experiments on the prisoners, they were told, hey, if you come work for us, we'll pardon you of all your crimes. And that's both Americans and the Russians. And that's literally what happened. They said, okay, now you work for the US government. Okay, now you work for Russia. Show us your research. Show us all these different things. And these are people who were criminals who basically did worse stuff than the generals.
Mhm.
But because they had this information, now they're giving it to the US government. And when you look, and you can look this all up into yourself, but this is actually true.
I have read that. Yeah, I
Mhm.
have read that. Or if not that whole story, I've certainly read that there are that we have had scientists in the country that came from Nazi Germany that were
Mhm.
involved in that regime. So I've heard that. That hangs together for me. Yeah.
Mhm. And so it's stuff like that. So whenever I first read that, I'm like, whoa, it just kind of changes your perspective a little bit. And it's like, man, like, why would we do that? Why is it really worth it? And again, that's something that's actually backed by facts that you can look up. And I'm not just saying, oh, blah, 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 saying all these different things. And during the midst of, reading all about that, reading about all these different things, and I was even reading about how there's rampant pedophilia going on, again, local levels, state levels, federal levels. I think I was reading about a specific one in, I think it was Omaha, Nebraska. I think it's called Boys Town, Nebraska. But again, I'm reading about all this personal research that these people have done, and basically, it was this organization where, oh, we take wayward boys, these kids with no families, we bring them in, we take care of them, and then they started realizing, wait a second, these kids are,
Yeah.
being, things are going on, and so this person,
I want to interrupt you for a second there on that one, because that's one of the things that I see very often with people who are corrupt. They will pretend to be involved in civic organizations. They will pretend to be, they'll be in your church, they'll be in your Rotary
yes,
Club, they'll be places where, and they might even be the man of the year, the
yep,
Rotarian of the year, or the Chamber of Commerce person of the year, because that's a cover for what they
yeah,
do. And
mm-hmm.
and the people that they help, and of course, it's kind of true for many of us. People who need help often are, to some extent, helpless, but
Mm-hmm.
they will choose the people who can't fight back.
Yeah,
So these pedophiles aren't going to choose the kids from healthy families. They're going to choose kids with single moms, or kids with single dads, or kids who, for one reason or another, are vulnerable. Kids whose parents work all day and they aren't going to know for sure what's happening, or they'll be involved in the Boys and Girls Club, or
mm-hmm.
or they'll help the homeless, because no matter what if they steal from the homeless, who's going to believe the homeless? So I
Exactly.
see that a lot. That
Mm-hmm.
it's certainly not to say that everybody who works with young children is a pedophile, of
Of course.
course, or that everyone who works with the homeless. But I often find that people who are corrupt will choose to work with people who can't fight back. And
Mm-hmm.
then the other thing they will do is, it's who they have around them. They'll choose people around them who are their yes men, who are their gophers, who will do what they want, who are corruptible, who are weak, or who
Mm-hmm.
are dependent on them for one reason or another. And
Mm-hmm.
then one time, this is the worst thing of all, one time with corruption. I mean, if you're talking generally, the devil, you're too young to know Flip Wilson. I used to love Flip Wilson. He was this amazing, really funny comedian.
Mm-hmm.
Came out in the 60s and 70s, but Flip used to say, the devil made me do it. And he had all these really funny comedy sketches. And that's kind of, it's hard to personalize that.
Mm-hmm.
But when you start to look at situations like this, all of a sudden it's very personal. You can
Mm-hmm.
see how it works. You can see that they pick people who are corruptible. And what happens is, you give in one time, and this is unlike there are a lot of things, you do something wrong and you can sort it out. But if you give in one time to a corrupt machine or a corrupt individual, they own you,
Yeah.
because they always know that you gave in. And so
Mm-hmm.
you can't get out of it without getting caught, or
Mm-hmm.
without, so you end up, and people who do that are generally corruptible or weak anyway. and they end up being beholden, and they could never get out. And that's the scariest thing of all. It only takes one time when you're dealing with corrupt people. It's really that's to me, that's almost the worst thing of all about it. It's hard to escape.
Especially
and
with
you expect that if you're talking about gangs or the mafia, but you don't necessarily expect it on a more local level. Anyway, I interrupted you there, but
no, you're perfectly fine. And even like what you were saying with when it comes to blackmail, I mean, that, again, it just takes one time. And even it's funny because my pastor today was saying how it's one of a good pastor friend of his. He kind of works with a bunch of mega churches, that have, a lot of money. And his pastor friend was saying that what he had this run-in with this organization where they basically, they would purposely send a very attractive and beautiful woman to these mega churches to go to the pastors and basically seduce them, sleep with them. Then, also now they have videos, they have photographs, they have all this stuff. And then they say, hey, your church has all this money. You better pay us X amount of money or else we're going to blast all of this over on social media. And then these people, and now he never said that it worked, so I don't know if it went to pass, but they came in contact with these people where they basically like, well, now you have to pay us money or else. And I feel like that's what happens with a lot of these situations. Again, like you said, just one time, now you're blackmailed. Now you're owned for the rest of your life. Because even if you do stand up for what's right, now you're losing everything instead of standing up from the very beginning. And going back real quick to the Nebraska thing. So this, this investigative journalist going to all this stuff, and then he goes to mayor. He's like, Mayor, do you like here's again all this proof of what's going on in your city? And the mayor literally told him like, you don't want to get involved with this. He's like the mayor, like for your own safety, you might want to step back, because again, these aren't just this random dude on the street. I mean, they're terrible people all over the world, but not some random dude on the street doing something bad to a little kid. This is like an organized situation with high up people. Now, taking this to a local level, because it's interesting because I'm reading that stuff in a different city, states away, but I'm like, that exact thing happened here. And I live in Hammond, Louisiana. And it's actually a church. It was in between Hammond and Ponchatoula. This was maybe about 10 years ago, I think it broke out. But what they found out was that at this church, they were doing animal sacrifices. They had satanic, blood that they were doing, all these rituals. And yes, they were doing things with kids, they were doing all this terrible stuff. And apparently what happened was when it first kind of came to light, they started investigating it. And then it kind of the investigation got shut down. And then when they reopened it, they realized, wait, the head person who was in charge of investigating it was a part of it. It was actually, I was talking to one of my pastors about it. I think it was it the chief of police? He was either the chief of police for the city, or he would, whatever was like, my pastor told me, like, he knew his name and everything. They knew each other, like grew up. And he was the lead investigative person on it. So again, you have the lead investigative person trying to expose his own thing. So of course it didn't work out well. And then it comes to life, the church gets obviously shut down. A lot of people got arrested. And it's kind of unfortunate because, those are just evil people, right? Like, they be Christians. They're not Christians. So I don't want people to be like, oh, there's the church, no, those are just wicked people. But now that building is kind of tainted because now a new church has come in. And now people's mindset of, well, that's the church that, used to, even completely different people, but it's kind of staying. And so people like still kind of talk about that today, and just within my local community. Unless you have something else to say, I want to share a quick, interesting story.
Yeah. No, go ahead. I'm all ears.
All right, so this is funny, and you'll see where it's leading to. But about 2 years ago, I was watching a TV show. I watched a few episodes, and basically in the show, there was one character who basically had all this knowledge, all this information that basically any other character just didn't have, and he kept it all to himself. And certain events happened, and the government was like, okay, we're gonna put this person in like solitary confinement. Like, we're gonna put him under our protection by himself. No one is allowed to go see him. Well, as the show goes along, it turns out that the guy that was in solitary confinement, that he had died and that he had committed suicide. And so the main characters in the show were like, wait, this guy had all this information, all this knowledge. We really needed to talk to him. And now he killed himself. And then they were like, wait, why would he kill himself? And as they kind of investigated it, they realized that, oh, it was the people that were watching over him got whatever information they needed and then killed him. That way no one else could get it. And now the government was like, well, now he's, this is a crime scene, so civilians aren't allowed, and they stopped it. So I'm watching the show and I'm like, oh, this is, it's really interesting, really entertaining. I go to sleep and I wake up, and I swear to you, that morning, the news breaks out that Jeffrey Epstein had killed himself. And I'm looking at the news. I'm like, this has to be from the Lord or something, because I'm telling you, it was like the exact same scenario that happened in the TV show happened. Telling you the very next morning. Now, here's the thing again with these conspiracy theorists. As soon as that came out, all of a sudden people saying, oh, that wasn't Jeffrey Epstein. That was a lookalike. That was a clone. The real Jeffrey Epstein died 15 years ago. And now now I did all this stuff that they're adding on. And, you'll read 5 different theories about what happened. And I'm like, wait, like all of them are different from one another. So at least half of them are false. Like they just had, like, it wouldn't make sense. Something's off. So what people, again, they kind of get distracted by is all this really interesting, he's fake, he's an alien, blah, 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 Hillary Clinton, Donald Trump, all this kind of different things. But the way my mind works is, okay, so Jeffrey Epstein was running an international sex trafficking ring. It takes more than 1 or 2 people to run an international sex trafficking. Like, to me, that's where my mind is with all that. Whether or not he killed himself and the sketchy stuff behind it, it's interesting, but I'm gonna keep it over there. But I'm gonna focus on the facts of, like, how did 1 or 2 people with his accomplice, how did they run an international sex trafficking ring? And then again, we see it, like I said, with Nebraska, where people were trying to cover it up. We see it in my hometown where the chief of police, the guy investigating, is covering it up. You see it all over the place. Sandusky for Penn State. Again, he was doing stuff with inappropriate kids, and people hush, keeping it low, and then it breaks out. There's so many things about that. So it's basically like, we have to admit that there's a problem, right? Mm-hmm. Like we have to at least acknowledge that there's a problem. And I think there are some people who can acknowledge it, but they're like, oh, you know how people are, the world is, but it's like, wait, this is a very serious matter. Again, it's happening on the local level, the state level, and the federal level. And it's bad. And so,
I think one of the biggest problems that you mentioned there, well, a couple of things in terms of him being in the jail, and you're right, the bigger picture is the bigger picture. It's who else is involved, and in our situation in our town, if you think about it, if someone didn't kill him, it probably would have been best if he killed himself, because somebody was going to. Because they would have known that he would have been giving the information out, and they couldn't afford to have that happen. So no matter how it happened, it was going to happen one way or the other. And so in some ways, it's almost a form of self-defense to commit suicide in those circumstances. Once you've told the whole story, you're done anyway, unless you get off into witness protection. So that's one thing. And those were the questions I had about our own scenario in my county. But then the other thing, and I lost my second train of thought, which actually was more important. I'm going to let you go ahead and go on, and I'll come back to it because I'll remember it. Do you remember where you were when I interrupted you?
No, I was just finishing off again, just about looking at the bigger picture, and then and then the other thing is just as far as like corruption goes, another thing that people need to be aware of is just propaganda and media and how things are just portrayed. And I just actually remembered, do you know like Colin Kaepernick, the quarterback who started the whole kneeling thing? Well, again, just an example of that, I remember seeing a picture of him on Facebook, and it was him just walking, and he had a backpack on, and it had like, Muslim writing on it, Islamic writing on it. And so the post was like, see, this guy's, he's a Muslim terrorist, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So look at paint that picture, all stuff. And then someone posted, like, someone edited this photo. And then they showed the actual photo and the backpack had nothing on it. So someone went out of their way and scribbled it and then just like, bam, look how, evil this person is. And again, so it's like when these things get to on the national federal level about this corruption, again, basically, I just call it like the devil's tactics, right? And basically evil, wicked people, they try and give you something, then divert attention, and then divert, and then divert, and then divert, and it's always diverting. And then all of a sudden, and then you look like a fool because you're posting, you're telling people, oh, he's a Muslim. Oh, see, I knew it. And then it's like, oh, that was false. And now everything that you had just been saying for the past however many days, weeks, months, now it's like, well, you were wrong. And then once you're wrong, it's hard to get your credibility back.
Right. And those, you're right about the diversions, because that's exactly what happens is they divert and they divert and they divert. And there's all kinds of tactics and emotional stuff that goes on to move you. Hey, look this way, don't look that way.
Mm-hmm.
And I remembered what I was gonna say is the other thing that you see, of course, is cover-ups. But the thing that's worst about it is often the cover-ups are in institutions where we really need to be able to trust them. So the church is, the Catholic Church is covering up for priests who are abusing children, and so those children are forever damaged, especially because they aren't believed, and then the victim becomes the criminal, as it were. And it's the victim who gets punished, and they always do. There's a pain that comes with being the victim, but the other side is that you'll get government institutions doing that as well. And because they don't want their reputations tarnished. And I think that is as evil as the perpetrating it, because what it does is it enables it to go on and on and on. And if you catch it right away, and if for instance, our county supervisor, this has been stories that I've heard, but they've been from really credible sources. He had been the chair of a homeless committee, and all of a sudden there were issues with the funds, and he lost his job, and then went on to be a supervisor. But if someone at the college where he worked had reported him or gone after him, he may never have become the supervisor that ended up committing suicide, and also taking bribes and giving bribes and all kinds of bad stuff that he did, a lot of it which will never be uncovered completely. But it's when other institutions, government institutions and churches cover up, they are complicit. And when a city council covers up, they are complicit. And so that puts you in a tough position, because sometimes you can't say anything because you're the district attorney and you're investigating, or sometimes you can't say anything because it's a council matter and the FBI is investigating. And if you say something, you'll harm their investigation. So it really does brings up a lot of issues. But I think the most important is that you have to speak truth. You have to remember, always speak truth. And that was the question I used to always ask myself is, how do I speak the truth in love? And that's, sometimes the truth is often ugly. So how do you speak that ugly truth in love? And of course, the people you're speaking the ugly truth about certainly don't feel like you're speaking it in love. But anyway, that's kind of going off on another thing. But you getting back to where you were talking about cover-ups and so
it doesn't, I was saying, just in general, going off of what you were saying, and that's what I like about myself running for politics is that I honestly don't even like politics. Like I remember just like growing up, just thinking about I'm like fake. What's the point? These are children just like fighting against each other. I never had any interest in it. But again, once I had that experience with God, and God told me, Grant, I've called you to do this. I've called you to do that. Then it's like, okay, God, you want me to get involved in politics? Then I'm going to do it because that's what I'm called to do. And what I tell people, because as soon as I say, oh, I'm interested in running for politics, or like in Louisiana, like, oof, good luck. And, people are like, I would never do that. Are you sure you want to do that? Blah, 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 all different things. I'm like, look, I don't want to do it for my own self-gain. It's literally for a reason, and it's for a purpose. And, they say like, oh, watch out for bribes, watch out for corruption and all that stuff. I'm like, oh, thank you for the advice and for the prayers. I said, but I know I don't have to worry about it, because at the end of the day, I have to answer to God. So if I were to take a bribe, it doesn't matter how good of a bribe it is. Like, I'm going to have to answer to him at the end of the day, regardless of what it is. Like, so I'm like, I have a good head on my shoulders because I'm like, I'm not going to ruin my relationship with God. I am not going to acquire God's wrath. And I've always just had this idea of, especially once I get deeper and deeper into politics, because I'm honestly just starting out. I have a meeting this Saturday coming up, actually, with a lot of ministers in the area. The school board of my parish and the superintendent are all going to be there. So it's going to be actually really big for me. But I have to start out on a local level, and I really plan on getting more to getting into Congress is, as of right now, my end goal. What I really want to do is keep, like, I jokingly call it like my black notebook, and just anything sketchy that happens, any kind of corrupt, any kind of bribe, any kind of thing, I want to actually record it all and jot it all down. Whether I actually, do it on my notebook, put it on a flash drive. I want to have all my bases covered, just being like, this happened, that happened. Someone told me this, someone bribed me with that. But I want to have all this kind of stuff, and I won't ever touch it. But I want to be like, I've covered all my ducks. And it was really cool because I had a dream one time, and God speaks to me a lot in my dreams. And in my dream, I was speaking on a platform, and I was speaking very passionately about corruption. I remember I was speaking, and I was like, there's corruption around, government corruption. I said, here's physical proof. I had like a stack of paper that said, here's physical proof of corruption. And I put it down on the podium and said, come up here and debate me on this, because this is actual facts. Come up and debate me, because you're not gonna win. But what I really want to do is just be like, okay, let's, again, what happens, the problem with these conspiracy theories is, oh, blah, 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 this, oh, blah, blah, and all this kind of different things. So now the national, like the overall mindset of your average American doesn't really know what's right and doesn't really know what's wrong. I've been telling people, there was a Facebook meme I thought was really funny. And the guy said, I believe everything that man said because it's exactly what I wanted to hear. So, so again, basically it's like, oh, this is my personal preference. And, oh, he agrees. Oh yeah, that's right. And again, same thing, now notice my words, the January 6th, the riot, whenever, oh, the election was rigged, blah, blah, blah. If you voted for Donald Trump, I'm not saying 100%, but for the most part, when you hear the election was rigged, you're like, I knew something was wrong. All of a sudden you have the mindset of, or even if you don't, like, you want it to be true. But if you voted for Joe Biden, then you immediately, no, it wasn't, and it's like, okay, wait, it's whatever it is, it's your just personal perspective. And so then you have all these different things going, oh, this is rigged, blah, blah, blah. No, Joe Biden this, no, Donald, and all these kind of different things. But what I eventually want to do, as far as like exposing corruption, be like, no, like opinions are thrown out the way, personal preferences thrown out the way. Let's look at these actual physical facts. Open it up. Did you know that on August 1st, blah, 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 that this person made this thing, blah, blah, blah. Did you know that? Okay, you didn't. Well, now you do. Next, okay. And then all of a sudden I have these things down to where it's like the average person's like, wow, wait, what? They did what? Wait, what? Nazi scientists? We hired Nazi scientists? Wait, why did this company do this? Wait, Jeffrey Epstein worked with who? And basically, I want to have these actual physical facts. And then it just makes you wonder, so what happens as people who at first are just casual about corruption? Maybe they treat these corruption stories as like the murder mystery, where they're just like, ooh, let's read about the next scandal that's going on. But at what point do we as Americans are like, okay, hold up, like there's corruption, like in all aspects of life, local, state, federal, or again, people know that, and like, oh, the banks are corrupt, oh, politicians are corrupt. But then a lot of people don't think about agriculture. Like, our agriculture system is very corrupt. They have these big companies. One of them, I think they bought like the genome for like some like soybean plants, and so they own like the actual like genetic makeup of it. And so if you're caught with a soybean that replicates their genetic code, you have to pay them like thousands of dollars. And so you have these local farmers who all of a sudden their livelihoods, their plants get not infected, but the new soy plant get on the field, and now all of a sudden this company is like, well, now we own all your crops. And they're like, we've been farming the same plot of lands for family and generation. No, look at this patented contract, because everything's a business, and now they're out of money. Or like pharmaceuticals, when you think about medicine, in my naive self when I was younger, I think, oh, medicine is to help people. No, pharmaceuticals is a business. They're trying to make money. So they change this around and move this and all this kind of different things because their end goal is to make money. It's not really to actually help people. And honestly, the more sick people you have that have long-term care in hospitals, the more money the government actually ends up making. So even if the people administering the medicine have the right mindset, oh, we want to help people, the backings behind it are sometimes more focused on the money aspects. And it's just, and that's kind of what it came down to with me is, I've shared a couple of things I looked into, but I'm a very factual person. So I look into all of these different things. I'm like, man, like there really is so much corruption on so many levels. Even again, media, television, propaganda, all that. It's all to again divert or to have an agenda, and it's just really unfortunate. But
Yeah, and as you say all this, I'm thinking, when I first started in politics, I didn't go into it because I thought there was corruption. I went into it because I knew I had a degree in PR, and my little town needed some help with their public relations and their image. And I had really good experience starting my own company, employing a lot of people, and then working as a consultant for numerous government agencies in redevelopment. And my town needed that. And so I thought, hey, I could really help out here. And my business that I sold before I came back to California, I was living in Scotland, but the business was about the same size as our little city, about the same number of employees, about the same budget. And I thought, oh, I could do this. I could get my arms around this and really help. And that was my motivation. And then I found out that I could help, and I did help in some ways, but but the problem was that I couldn't do a lot of there was a lot that I couldn't do because I ended up butting up against corruption. And so I ended up having to chase down corruption before anything else could happen. And I think where I'm going with this is that, when the job, there's a job description for someone who goes in, well, the job description is to represent people, to represent the people who elect you, and not just the ones who elect you, but the whole area or geographical location. Your job is to look after their interests at a national level, to represent them. And so it's not necessarily, and if God's calling you to go after corruption, and this is how he's saying to do it, then I'm not, who am I to say otherwise? And I'm thinking though that there's probably going to be a much broader thing out there for you than just going in to fight corruption. Although I will say that's a really, and I know you're not doing it for this reason, but people feel the way you feel about it, and they see what you're seeing, and they do want someone who'll take down corruption, because one thing everybody agrees on is that we want honest government. And I would say I had to come to terms with it when I came across corruption, because I haven't come across it that many, only a couple of times in my life, really, where I've had to stand up to it. And I know I've figured out that it really is like everything else, it's on a spectrum. There's some people who are way right or way bad. There's some people who are way left or way bad or way good. But you've got extremes on either end. And then all the rest of us are somewhere closer to the middle. And most of us are bunched up in the middle. And it's the same with corruption in communities. You have some communities that are model communities. They're doing it right. They're honest. They're serving the people who live there. They're being responsible with the tax dollars to make them work for them well. And then you get some who are the opposite end of the spectrum. And then you get a lot who are kind of in the middle that have some corruption, and from time to time they do, but it's not all the way through. So, you mentioned this too, but a lot of times when you're looking from the outside, things will look like corruption because you don't understand it. And then once you start to research, you go, oh, okay, right, never mind. It looks kind of fishy, which is unfortunate, but it's not. And then there'll be other things that seem absolutely on the up and up that absolutely are not on the up and up. And so it's a big topic. It's a big task. And have you decided what you're running for yet? What office? Or are you still figuring that out?
So I'm not sure if you had heard. I know you were busy
I
earlier,
was
but
getting distracted, yes.
how it all started was I had a dream of me going back to school, and I saw on the wall a health policy advisor. And that's the thing about me, is that I'm really big into health. And I completely forgot to mention this earlier, but again, I wanted to become a doctor. I wanted to help people, and that didn't necessarily work out. But I feel like what the Lord has been teaching me was like, okay, there's other ways to help people be healthy and just to improve their lives. And that's why I'm currently writing my book right now called God Heals by Faith. And basically, how a talk is, in order for us to be truly healthy, we have to be physically, emotionally, mentally, and spiritually healthy. And I kind of write about each one, about how to, what's the best diets, what is the pros and cons of each one? Why are vegetables good? Why is running good? All these different things, water, but then also your emotions, where it doesn't matter if you're an athlete, but you have, what if you have unforgiveness in your heart? Or if you have unchecked trauma that you haven't truly addressed or healed from, that's going to affect you in your personal and professional life. So if you want to truly just be at balance, you have to have all levels of self intact. And I'm just very passionate about health in general. I'm a very scientific mindset, and I'm getting my master's in public health at Tulane right now.
Oh,
So,
excellent.
so
Good.
my goal is, as I get into government, I mean, honestly, corruption's just something I'm gonna have to face, but I'm going in there with the mindset of like, well, I want to actually improve my community. And especially Louisiana, we literally rank dead last in almost every single, like, any good category. We're like dead last in like education, obesity, health, cardiac deaths, all these different things. Like, we're very, very, very low. So I'm like, okay, how, like, again, there's a problem. Like, we're ranked last in all these different things. There's a problem. Let's try and fix it. What's that solution? And
And I hear you, because every time I see corruption, I see those kinds of problems. I see that people are suffering. And that's
mm,
the reason that I wrote my book too, The
mm,
Happiest Corruption, because I could see that the corruption was causing people to suffer. And if
mm,
people didn't understand the downside of it, I mean, you only have to go to Sicily, where the mafia controls it, and it's this incredibly rich environment. And yet it's dirty and people are poor. Now, what's that about?
yeah.
And you're talking about Louisiana, and it has a reputation for corruption. And unfortunately, where there's corruption, there's poverty. It's poverty of spirit among the corrupt, but it corrupts everybody else's lives. It takes down their happiness. It takes down
Mhm.
their health. So yeah, I hear you. That makes a lot of sense from where you are.
And so that's what it is. So I want to, implement new policies, especially, again, I did a whole bunch of research on health, nutrition, especially gut health. And my dad is actually a doctor himself, and I talked to him. He said in medical school they weren't taught anything about nutrition. Their curriculum is, if someone has problem A, you give them answer B. Like, they have this sickness, give them this. If this is wrong, do this. But they don't teach, like, okay, why is health so important? Why is nutrition so important? What are, even in regards to mental illnesses, right now, how we treat mental illnesses, they throw pills at them. My mom, bless her heart, she's a bipolar and borderline personality disorder. And every morning she takes, I think, like 12 or 16 pills, and every night she takes the same pills. And it's like, I look at it and I'm like, you're just masking the problem. You're not actually helping it. When there's more and more research saying, actually, with proper nutrition and exercise, you can actually alleviate a lot of these mental illnesses. You can actually prevent Alzheimer's with, reading and diet and more of this enzyme in your body and all these different things. So I want to help promote, like, okay, how do we get our medical professionals to learn this stuff more, to take it more seriously? Because even I keep on forgetting his name, but there's a famous guy. He's been writing a lot of health books. Again, he was in medical school and his mom had cancer. And so he's like, in the mindset, okay, I'm in medical school, so I'm going to learn about cancer. I'm going to learn these things, that way I can take care of my mom. And he never really learned anything helpful. And the mom ended up passing away. And then a few years later, he's looking into alkaline diets and gut health and all these things, and people being able to recover from cancer. And he got mad. He's like, why was I never taught this? Why
Mhm.
medical did they never? And he was like furious. because he's like, y'all didn't help me with my mom. And so now that's his main goal is, again, writing, speaking, teaching, and saying, hey, this is how you take control of your own health. And that's what I want to do as well. So that's how it's starting with me. And then, like I said, I just know as I get into it, again, I know I'm going to have that corruption come against me. I know people, well, what about this? Or you want this? Or all this kind of different. And like, it's basically it's going to find me. I don't have to find corruption. Corruption's going to find me.
It will find you.
It-
It
it's
will
just-
find you.
It's just what's and you know, honestly, I just know I'm blessed by the Lord, and so I know that He's called me to do this because I'm someone who's gonna take this seriously. And again, as someone who, you know, I've never wanted the limelight. I'm not one like the hey, look at me, big time person. But I'm like, okay, but I'm called to do something. I'm gonna take it seriously. And as of right now, I'm about to meet with the local leaders of my community to see as far as what I can run for locally. But the end goal is, like I said, I want to get into Congress and I want to represent the people of Louisiana. So I know that's, as of right now, that's basically the end goal. And obviously, it's probably going to take a few years for me to get there, but I'm taking the steps that I need in order to make sure that happens. So
That's wonderful. Good.
overall-
We need more people like you doing that. That's
Mhm.
great. I think people with brains and people who are level-headed and people who are honest could change everything for a lot of people. It doesn't happen overnight, but it happens, and some of it can happen pretty quickly, quite quickly, because when things shift from being from a corrupt regime, which is frightening, and the culture is terrible, when they shift from that to being a positive regime, the whole feeling, the whole culture, the whole energy, everything it's just night and day. It changes. So it's really refreshing to hear from you. Now, what's the name of your book again, and when do you think you're going to have it out?
It's going to be called God Heals by Faith, and the goal is to have it come out early next year. So I'm
Okay.
shooting for January, but my wife is pregnant at the moment. The due date is in December. So I'm writing it, I'm working on it, but there's a good chance it might be delayed. So that's why I'm like, let's say early next year. So, but
And when do you finish your master's degree?
I think I have about a year and a half left. So I'm hoping by next fall I'll be able to have it. So that's the goal.
It's great.
Well,
Great.
yeah.
Was there anything else that we didn't cover that we were talking about, or that you? I'm looking at your list here of things that you had in mind when you emailed me. Was there anything else that you wanted to say or share that we didn't cover?
No, I think that was about it. Another good thing that I would like to say is I've actually met with a few politicians in Louisiana, and like some of the good ones. Actually, the Speaker of the House, his name is Clay Schneider for Speaker for Louisiana, and he's a real great guy, real man of God, and he's kind of gave me some good pointers, some good tips. And I met with a couple other people, and so what is nice is that I know that they're like not everyone in politics is evil and corrupt, you know. And I feel like I've been able to meet with, even if it's just kind of a handful or a couple at the moment, people who I know will stand for what's right. And so as I move forward, I know I'll have people that I can actually work in conjunction with, as opposed to just kind of being like on my own, lone wolf, everyone against me. So that's kind of giving me some comfort and confidence getting into this. But yeah, keep me in your prayers, because I know
Yeah. Oh, I will. And you
yeah.
know, that is hugely important, is the other people. Certainly a lot of the things that I came across because other people came to me, and it's sometimes employees, sometimes members of the public, you know, would come to me and they would be really concerned about things. And I'd find myself hearing the same story from different people who didn't even know each other. And by the time I heard it 3 times, I thought I better look at this.
Yeah.
And so the other people are really important. And you were talking about your pastors, and I can tell you Kansas City was really corrupt. It was run by a corrupt machine from about, I think, 1880, 1890 through to 1940. And then it was turned around. Finally, the people got mad, but the way it got turned around, part of it was, first of all, there was a rabbi who came to town, and he was really truly a prophet, and he was young. He was about 29, and I don't think he knew any better. Sometimes I didn't know any better. that age, and that's okay. That's why we need young people in office. But and he really read everybody the riot act. He said, hey, this is what's going on and you're allowing it. And then he went to all the churches, and all 104 of the Protestant churches started preaching from their pulpits about the corruption. And they all worked together along with the rabbi. They all worked together to root out the corruption. But it wasn't just the rabbi and all 104 churches in town. It was also it was all the people. It was the women who'd just gotten the vote, and a lot of women. And it was the African-American communities, the women and the men. It was the Jewish community. And it was, and of course it was the men, the businessmen and all. It was the old white guys too. But it had to be all the people. It's like, it was the whole village, as it were, although it was a city. But it really took everybody to make it work. And then at the end of the day, the feds had to come in. They had to have the FBI. President Roosevelt had to step in and get his top treasury guy in. But the thing that changes it is when everybody works together. If they hadn't worked together, I don't think it would have changed it. And that's something that happened 100 years ago, and it resonates so much with where we are today.
Yeah, definitely.
But that's the only way it works. And I think you'll find that two things, you'll have people like some of these people in leadership who will hold you accountable, and you'll need that, because there'll be times where you'll need people to ask you those hard questions to make sure you stay on track, and you'll probably want that. I certainly did. And then there'll be all the others who will come to the meetings and speak up and stand up. And because things don't change because one person says something, usually it's because a whole lot of people are wound up about it. And that's what gets government agencies to respond. So, but what happened for me is I found, when you're in a village, everybody's different. And I met people I never thought I'd meet. And I worked with people I never thought I'd work with. And it was so refreshing. It was so heartwarming. And there were people who were so different and so disparate. And yet they really came to love each other, working together on these kinds of things. And for me, that's as much the beauty of it almost as taking down the corruption, is the relationships that are built doing it, bringing about something good. So I think you'll have a really rich time, and I'm really glad you're going to do that. So I think we'll all be watching to see what you get and when you get it and how you go.
Yes, ma'am. And what's great is that I'll be able to just maintain contact with you, because, and again, what's again cool about me is I'm not doing this for my own personal gain. This is actually what God's called me to do. So if God's calling me to do something and he's saying that I'm going to achieve it, then I know I will. So it'll be nice being able to just keep in touch and keep track of everything going on. And and it's cool what you're saying about everyone working together. That's kind of how I have it in my mindset of how, I pray and hope that's going to work out. Is again, if I have a book like, bam, here's corruption staring you in the face, whether you like me or not, like, you're going to want to join my side, because I'm going up against people who are trying to harm you. It doesn't matter if you like me or dislike me, or I disagree about Grant on this thing or that thing, but it's like, okay, but look at the real problem at hand, because this is affecting you, this is affecting you, this is affecting you, even if you're all part of different communities and all this kind of different, it's affecting every single one of us. And it was basically like the passion of the dream was like, you should be mad at what's going on, and let me show you why you should be mad. And that's really how I'm going to be tackling it. So I think I see overall, I'm not saying everyone will love me, I'm not trying to say that, but I think how I'm going about it is going to be like, let me show you how we can work together. And then the last thing I want to say is even when I start like really running for bigger offices, I kind of want my slogan to be, we the people. Like, I'm trying to give people like power back to the people. So if I'm speaking and there's 1,000 people in front of me, I said, look, each and every one of you are just as powerful as me. So when I'm speaking to 1,000 of y'all are more powerful than me. Like, I'm willing to accept that. So my goal standing up here speaking to you is to have you step into your power, you step into your power, so all of y'all reach your highest potential. And that's really how you make a big difference. And I want to even and I want to yell at people, basically like, don't just vote for me and then do nothing. Like, no, like you do what you need to do. And I'll even say how, there's this thing called a convenient Christian, to where, oh, I only go to church, on Easter and Christmas and, 2-3 times a year. Well, we have convenient Americans where we say, oh, I'm only American on the 4th of July or
Or
Cinco
I
de
vote.
Mayo,
Yeah.
or, but it's like, no, we need to be true Americans every single day. So don't just be posting on social media about equality and racial this, racial that, but then you go to the gas station and you curse out the cash register, or you yell at the waitress. Like, no. My goal is for each individual person to be the best person they can be, and then that's how you start making change. It's not just by one person. It doesn't matter how high up I go. It's gonna be y'all, the people that I speak to, y'all equipping yourselves correctly, and now we're creating change. So
Yeah, it's a government of the people, by the people, for the people. It was set up like that. We are supposed to participate, especially on a local level. And
yes.
if we don't, it goes wrong. And what I say to people, I'm always happy when they agree with me, but I say, you know what, it's a good thing to vote and it's a good thing to march. It doesn't get much done.
Yeah.
Once you've voted, once you've marched, you got to go make sure that you're at those meetings every week. You got to make sure that your representatives are representing you, and you got to make sure they know how you want to be represented and what you want. Because if you don't tell them what you want, if you don't tell them what it's like on your street, how do they know? So it's our job. It's every individual's job. And as you say, we all have different gifts. And so we are going to do it different ways. Some people are going to run for office. Some people are going to do research. Some people are going to stand and speak their piece. Some people are going to drive people to the polls, all kinds of different things. You work where, you bloom where you're planted, you work where you're placed, you work with with the gifts God gave you. And if we're doing that, yes, it does make a huge difference. And so I always say to people, I don't want to hear anybody complaining about government. You don't like government? Well, guess what? It belongs to you. So go in and fix it, because it's our government. It's of the people. It's your government. So you don't like it, go fix it. Anyway,
that's what I tell people about.
Soapbox here.
And that's what I tell people. It's like being a big sports fan, and every time your team loses a big game or makes a bad mistake, it doesn't matter how mad you get or how much yelling you do, you're not actually benefiting your team. You're just yelling at a TV screen. You're just yelling at the players. But I'm like, okay, but what are you actually doing to make things better? And that's what we have too much nowadays. Again, like when people want to face corruption, right? You just look on like Facebook, social media, again, like, oh, all these things going on, blah, blah, but then they're distracted, they're diverted. They don't really know what's actually true. But if we can focus in, and I say you focus and be like, okay, here's an actual problem. Again, Jeffrey Epstein, 2 people, international sex trafficking ring, like there's a problem. But then most people just kind of tweet about it or talk about it casually. But it's like, okay, we need the people that are actually like gonna go after it, and not just the big levels, but again, the local levels. Again, I heard rumors about this person down the street or this person, blah, blah, blah. Okay, are you actually gonna take steps to actually bring it up? Like you said, people actually came to you about certain topics. That's what we need, is people to actually be willing to go out and say something. And again, you can't face corruption alone. I can't face corruption. No one can face it alone. So that's why it's like, okay, come on, guys, we need to do this together. Otherwise, it's just, we're not going to really get anywhere. So, but yeah.
It won't be better. Well, thank you so much, Grant. And I'm looking forward to talking with you again as things progress, and good luck to your wife with her pregnancy. And thank you so much for taking the time today. It was wonderful to talk to you.
Of course. And thank you for having me. I really appreciate it. And I'll definitely keep you updated on everything as the book comes out, as I progress, as I start moving up. And then I would love to hear updates from you. So I definitely plan on being in touch for a while. So
we'll do that. We'll stay in touch. Okay.
Right.
Thank you, Grant.
Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.